Anyone who has tried to buy a house in the Austin area over these last several months knows that it's competitive. And when a buyer begins to realize that in order to even be competitive, they're going to have to give up more concessions and probably spend more money than they were planning, one of two things can happen. One, they give up and drop out of the market completely, which does not move them closer to actually buying a house. Or two, they begin to take more risks. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking risks if you understand the potential consequences. One high-risk tactic we're seeing more and more recently is called the ghost offer. And if you're thinking about doing this, I highly recommend you consider what you could be opening yourself up to, because this strategy could backfire and wind up costing you a lot more than you think. Stick around for this video and I'll tell you all about it. First of all, quick disclaimer. I am not an attorney, and nothing in this video should be construed as legal advice. I am a realtor here in the Austin area, and I have knowledge of the Texas real estate contracts. My intention is to explain some of the terms of these contracts and review some very basic legal principles. If you have questions about contract law, the legal process, or specific questions on your situation, I highly encourage you to seek the advice of a competent attorney licensed to practice law in the state of Texas. Now, in a normal market, which seems like so long ago, when a buyer finds a house they like, they submit an offer and then negotiate the specific terms with the seller. In today's market, multiple offers are the norm. And because of the increased competition, that buyer may not get their first, second, or even 10th choice. Usually, after someone submits 5 or 10 offers and gets outbid every time, they begin to start thinking about ways that they can increase their chances of actually getting a house. One tactic is to place offers on 2, 3, or 5 different houses all at the same time. Now, that buyer has no intention of buying all of them. All they're trying to do is tilt the odds in their favor. If they got outbid on 4 of them, they could still get the 5th one, and nobody would ever know that they'd been outbid on the other 4. But what happens if their offer is accepted on 2 or more of those houses? Well, a ghost offer is when the seller accepts your offer and then the buyer disappears like a ghost and doesn't do anything more. They don't deposit the option fee, they don't deposit the earnest money, they just want to walk away from the contract. The logic behind this is if they don't deposit the earnest money, then the seller can't take it. And if there are multiple offers, the seller can just move on to the next one. Now, maybe you'll get lucky, and that's exactly what will happen. But let's take a look at the Texas contract and explore some of the other options that seller has. An executed contract is when both parties sign it. But an executory contract means there are terms that are to be carried out at a later date. In real estate, when the buyer and seller sign the contract, it is executed. But the contract is executory because each party needs to do certain things before all the terms of the contract are fulfilled. If either party doesn't do what they've agreed to do, it's called a default. And there is a paragraph in the Texas contract which defines what the non-defaulting party can do to remedy default. But more on that later. When a buyer submits an offer on a house, what actually happens is they complete the entire contract, sign it, and then send it to the seller. All it takes is the seller's signature to make it an executed contract. And in a scenario like we talked about before, where there are 2 or more executed contracts with different sellers, that buyer is required to fulfill the terms of each contract, and if they don't, it's a default. Now, the Texas contract does provide a termination option, often called the option period, where for a specified time, the buyer has the unrestricted right to terminate the contract. But if the buyer waives the option period or doesn't pay the option fee, they forfeit this unrestricted right to terminate. Now, I am not condoning ghost offers, but I do want to emphasize this. If you change your mind and want to get out of a Texas real estate contract, the easiest way to do it is to pay the option fee and terminate the contract during the option period. But with a ghost offer, that buyer usually doesn't want to pay any money. They're hoping that seller just moves on to the next highest bidder. And this is where they open themselves up to potentially much more expensive consequences. This is the default clause in the Texas contract. If the buyer defaults, the seller can keep the earnest money as liquidated damages, But if the earnest money has not been deposited, there's nothing for the seller to keep. Now, whether the earnest money has been deposited or not, that seller also has the option to enforce specific performance or seek other relief as may be provided by law. In other words, they can sue you. Now, if you're wondering what you would do in a situation like this, or if you're beginning to think, well, I wonder if they could even win a lawsuit like that, the first step is to contact a real estate attorney. And when you do that, you better bring your checkbook because it's not going to be free. Think about this scenario. Let's say you signed a contract to pay $500,000 for that seller's house. What if they sued you for that entire amount? Call your lender, see what they say. What's the chance of you retaining that approval on the house that you really want when you have a pending lawsuit for $500,000? Well, I hope this is helpful. You know, I get emails, texts, and phone calls almost every day from people who are thinking about buying or selling real estate here in the Austin area, and I'd love to help you out too. If you like my videos, subscribe to the channel and be sure to hit that notification bell. All of my contact information is in the video description, so don't be shy. Let's make your real estate dreams come true.